right, it is a Friday. Welcome to your Friday, almost the weekend. We have some work to do, though, before we get to the weekend. So let's talk about some of these issues that are percolating to the top of my mind. This one I saw on the CBC website this morning. A 42-year-old man has been charged with impaired driving after an e-bike was seen weaving in and out of traffic in Amherst, forcing several vehicles to pull to the side of the road. The man was arrested and around 7 p.m. June 23rd, so this is quite a while ago, after an off-duty officer went with the Amherst police, spotted the e-bike swerving in front of vehicles. So the reason why I bring this up, folks, is because we talk an awful lot on the show about active transportation and bike lanes, and I think that this is something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed in an immediate fashion. In particular, I'll talk about HRM here. And it's enforcement or lack thereof when it comes to e-bikes and e-scooters and whatever else is e-mobilized. Because, look, folks, how often do you see these scooters, in particular these scooters, which I think are very, very dangerous, inherently dangerous, when you look at the riding position of a scooter, which is going, and again, I don't know what the top speed of these things are, but they zip along pretty fast. Okay? Much faster than you could pedal a bicycle. Much faster. And same as these e-bikes, I mean, it might as well be a motorbike for all intents and purposes. That's what it is. It's a motorbike. But for whatever reason, people too often, not everybody, of course, I don't want to categorize everybody into paint everybody with the same broad brush, but I think that it's safe to say that far too often people using these things are not following the rules of the road in any way, shape, or form. In and out of traffic, darting in and out of lanes, onto the sidewalk, down off the sidewalk at pretty high speed. And I think that we need to have enforcement on these infractions immediately. Police need to get a grip on these things, or they're going to spiral out of control. And liability, to me, is a serious issue here. Because what is the liability of somebody if they run into you with an e-bike or an e-scooter, or they run over a pedestrian or whatever? Who's liable? Are they insured? People rent these things. Is the company liable if somebody gets in an accident and kills somebody, or somebody dies in one of these things? I think it's inevitable that with these e-scooters that you're going to have, people you can rent these things, jump on them with no training. You don't even need to have a driver's license. You're on the road. So one of the questions that I'm going to ask you is, what are your thoughts on this? Should you have a special designation of a motorized vehicle and a license to operate it if you're going to drive an e-bike or an e-scooter? And I think it's a valid question. Again, you're traveling at speeds much higher than you can pedal a bicycle. There's liability in question. There's safety in question. And if you're going to operate it, perhaps you should have to have a special designation or a license to do so. To me, it's really not any different than a motorbike. Now, obviously, you can't travel at the high speeds of a motorbike, but you're still going much faster than you could ever pedal a bike. So is it time that if we're going to have these things in our city, which we have all over the place now, these scooters in particular, should you have to have some type of special designation and proof of insurance or something in order to operate them? And I think it's a valid question. And are e-scooters safe? I don't think that I'm 56 years old, so I'm not jumping on an e-scooter anytime soon. That all said, though, folks, I think that, are they safe to operate? These are some of the questions that I'll ask you to weigh in on when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12 today. Also, we'll continue our conversation that we had yesterday on affordability in Halifax, or lack thereof. I received a number of emails from people expressing their concerns about being able to live here in Halifax, because we talked about the cost of living being comparable to Toronto, according to a recent report and a CBC story, which I referenced yesterday. When you factor in rent and transportation, I think it's something like 30% of income. And that is exactly what it is in Toronto. And our tax rate, of course, we talked about that as well. So when you combine taxes and when you combine transportation and housing and food costs and all that, is it affordable to live here anymore? It used to be a deal to live in the Maritimes, and that was always the sales pitch. That, yes, you make less money, but it costs a lot less to live here than places like Toronto. That's not the case anymore. Empirical data proves that, has backed that up. So many callers yesterday from people frustrated by this, and I think rightfully so. So these are some of the other things that you can talk about again when we open the phone lines between 11 and 12. Oh, yes, and the Blue Jays are in first place now, by the way, in case you didn't catch that. That's right. The Blue Jays swept by New York Yankees. 4 games. That's an embarrassment. I think I heard it in our sportscast. That's the first time ever the Blue Jays swept the Yankees at home in a 4-game series. I think that was the statistic that I heard. But anyway, the Blue Jays are in first place, folks. We'll talk to Cecil about all of this when we get into sports at the end of the show. I'd like to thank Vanessa Vandeness as well, of course, as always, on the other side of the glass, doing a fine job. All right, let's dive into with our first guest, Tim Rissesco, Chief Executive Officer, Downtown Dartmouth Business Commission. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, it sounds like I'm all doom and gloom today, Tim.
Yeah, no, I don't know. It's sunny outside, and I'm pretty excited that the Blue Jays won. Sorry for your Yankees, but that was a good start for July to see that happen.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, off topic a little bit. What do you? I thought I'd get your take, perhaps, on what I was talking about when it comes to active transportation before I get into this buy local stuff, which is great. But do you have any thoughts or concerns on active transportation and bike lanes? It's a massive issue here in the city. It gets a lot of oxygen. Any thoughts in general from your vantage point on where we're going with this?
Well, I'm going to confess that I have my own e-bike. I drive on the road, and I'm not perfect. I'm not a saint, but I think I obey the rules of the road. And when I do drive it, it's one less car on the road, leading to congestion. I think what we need to do is have, the old saying, sometimes common sense is not all that common. I agree with you that we need to weed out some of the bad actors, particularly the people that may be driving their e-scooters or their e-bikes inappropriately on active use trails. But I think the future's here as far as people moving over to active transportation. If you're younger and fitter than me, you're probably on a regular bicycle. But for people like me in their mid-50s, an e-bike allows me to climb the hill up to my house without being totally out of wind by the time I get up there. So, I mean, that's my take. I don't really have a big opinion on the whole, how much we're investing in bike lanes or all that. Yeah. But I think we just need to find a way to coexist. And I think that's been the challenge of cities for time, for the since the start of time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the challenge, isn't it? Is that it only takes a small amount of people to ruin it for everybody else, right? And that's one of the issues here. And I don't want to pile on, and we need to be cognizant of that. But it's I think enforcement is important here. That police get their arms wrapped around this thing before it gets out of control.
Like in downtown Dartmouth, I get more complaints about a vehicle noise, like whether it's loud motorcycles or souped up cars with really loud mufflers roaring up Portland Street. We don't seem to be able to find a way to enforce that. I think that challenges police. There's, they have to be there and they have to have a decibel reader at the time to know that somebody's muffler or vehicle is making excessive noise. So it's all kinds of these little things that if too bad people can't police themselves on some of these and understand that we all have to live together.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about this story that I saw on the CTV website. The headline, Buy Local Momentum Leads Business Growth in Nova Scotia. And you're quoted in the story as saying that you feel as though we're heading in the right direction with this. Tell me why you feel as though that businesses are seeing an upswing when it comes to supporting local products.
Well, we're seeing some of the growth in downtown Dartmouth is around this. We have a new ice cream shop called Churned, vegetable-based ice cream, and she's producing her own there. So if people are lactose intolerant, they can go and purchase her ice cream, and she's producing it there. She has a retail storefront, but then she's also supplying lots of restaurants around town, and there's all kinds of examples like that in downtown Dartmouth of small businesses that rely on local producers, and we're seeing a bit of an upswing here. And in that story that you're quoting, it talks about OBs at the Alderney Farmers Market expanding over probably just a decade ago. They were at a vendor's table at the farmers market, and now they're in a much larger retail space than they've had in the past, and that's in response to people wanting to buy local, wanting to buy fresh produce and other farm products from the valley or around Nova Scotia, so they can go down to that store 7 days a week and pick that stuff up.
Okay, do you think the government, the Houston government's doing a decent job with its initiatives here and promoting all this stuff and bringing awareness to it?
Absolutely. I think Premier Houston has been a national leader in the whole idea of opening up Canada as one economy. The opportunity for our producers, whether it's craft breweries or cideries, to be able to, and the wineries, to be able to sell their products to other provinces without the red tape. He's led the country that way, and those are just three local products, but other things he's led the way, and then we've also taken advantage of the Nova Scotia Loyal program as a way to signify what is locally produced, and that's been a great awareness program. So I think the government's doing a great job with opening up markets and some of the marketing. I think what we could have some more support on is supporting more support for the marketing of the products, whether it's attracting visitors to the province this summer and to our downtowns and main streets. I could see there'd be an opportunity for growth in that area.
Do you think that for the most part people are willing to pay a bit more to support local?
I think so, and it's also a bit of a value proposition. I think the product that you're buying is better as well. I think people want to know where their food is coming from and are willing to pay a little bit more, and they'll see benefits in that. The provincial government's also done things with providing some coupons. I guess every school kid or every graduate received a coupon to a farmer's market. I think there's more work to do around food security and making sure we can connect our food producers with people that need support around buying groceries. But the people that can are appreciating local products.
Okay, Tim, appreciate your time. Thanks so much, and we'll do it again.
Yeah, thank you. And if you're up for going for a bike ride sometime, I'd be happy to join you.
All right, Tim. Thanks, pal.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Tim Rissesco, Chief Executive Officer, Downtown Dartmouth Business Commission. Mark Carney met with automotive sector CEOs and we're talking about the EV mandate changes. We'll get to this with Moshe Lander when we come back. All right, joining us is Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. Moshe, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate it.
Good morning.
All right, so the head of an organization representing automakers said he's cautiously optimistic after meeting with Mark Carney to urge him to repeal the electric vehicle sales mandate. Brian Kingston, the CEO of the Canadian Vehicle Manufacturers joined the CEOs of Ford Canada, Stellantis Canada, and GM Canada in a meeting with the Prime Minister on Wednesday in Ottawa. Obviously, lots to deal with when it comes to this and this trade war in general with the U.S. Is the writing on the wall when it comes to the EV mandate, Moshe?
Possibly, but I think the writing might be on the wall for the broader auto industry in Canada. In the last 25 years, auto production in Canada is down almost 50%.
Wow.
So that's not just tariff-related. That's a trend that's been going on even before COVID, going back to the dot-com crash. So, look, whether you want to make a zero emissions mandate, an EV mandate, whatever it is that you want to do, I don't know that saves the industry. And the idea of even trying to create a Canadian-only supply chain to withstand American tariffs might just be delaying the inevitable. So I think at this point there's a much bigger issue than whether the PM wants to now backtrack on this particular policy or even just look at saving the industry at all.
Okay, so what's the worst case scenario here, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, if you do stick with the mandate, I doubt it's going to be reached. I think at some point, some future government, liberal or conservative, is going to have to do something about it. When you pick these dates, usually they're far enough in the future that it's not during the term of the existing parliament, which means that responsibility is not going to fall to anybody that's currently in power. But the other part of it is that it's arbitrary, right? Why 2035? Well, it's a nice round number. Why not 2036 or 2038? So probably as we get closer, even if they stick with this legislation, the industry is going to push back maybe in about 5 years saying, we're nowhere close to achieving the number that you ask. Can you give us an extension? So even if the Prime Minister wants to dig in his heels and say, no, I'm committed to this, I believe in this, that's great. I don't think we're going to be talking in 2035 about the target being achieved.
Okay, so the worst case scenario for the industry in general then, and I don't mean to be doom and gloom here, but you kind of foreshadowed it in your comments. What might this industry look like if things continue in the trajectory that they're currently on?
Well, if the trend is down, then, I mean, obviously the worst case scenario is zero. I think at some point there has to be a realization that the auto industry makes up a huge amount of our manufacturing base, true. But if it is in decline, do we see something that's going to replace it? Do we see something that we can now jump in and say, hey, I think we can do this more efficiently, and maybe we can start looking at reallocating resources from this industry, which might be in terminal decline, or at least to some sort of much lower volume level and make sure that we salvage something. I don't think it's entirely wrong that we start buying our cars from somewhere other than Canada. And I'm somebody who grew up in southwestern Ontario, so that auto industry is extremely important to that part of the country. But look, the U.S. South doesn't have the same sort of restrictive labor laws. They don't have the pension legacies that a lot of the auto industry in Canada has. And so at some point, they've been stealing business, not because of unfair trade practices, but it's just they're more efficient, that they're able to produce more with less. So I think that it's a tough conversation for any politician to get in front of an open mic and have, but to say, listen, I don't know that we're really going to be doing this much longer, or that we should be doing it much longer. And so all of the support that we're offering is probably money that's never going to be recouped. What should we look at now? And I think that that's going to take some sort of vision or somebody who doesn't necessarily have to worry about re-election to say, I'll put my neck out on the line, and you'll thank me in 20 years, even though you might not thank me now.
Yeah, who might that be, though? Because we know vote rich and chasing votes is always at play here. So who? Mark Carney, I don't think has the fortitude to do that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think that he would want to do that. He does have that economics background, but the problem is that the economics background is now being overwhelmed by the politician part. It's kind of like that Seinfeld where George talks about the two Georges meeting, and one George will kill the other. Politician Mark Carney killed the economist Mark Carney. But look, I think what's going to happen, and it's usually the way that it happens in any sort of politics, is that there's going to be a crisis moment. And then whoever's the one in charge at the moment that the crisis happens is going to be the one that has to figure out what to do. So if you remember 10 years ago, it was the Obama administration that had to bail out the auto industry. I don't think that he was necessarily committed to that idea. It was just that he was sitting in the White House when that was necessary, and those hundreds of billions of dollars had to be allocated to it. It's the same thing that's going to happen here. At some point, we're going to reach a critical mass, or I guess the opposite of a critical mass, in the other direction, where it's, hey, maybe this isn't viable anymore. And then some government's going to have to face a choice of whether they want to throw billions of dollars at the problem, continue on with these mandates, put these restrictions on auto companies and make it even harder for them to achieve what limited volume they're already producing, or say, all right, you know what, I'm the one in charge, I have to take this decision.
All right, what about the trade war with the United States and the ongoing tariffs and the supply chains and how complex all that is? Where are we with that?
No further forward than we were last month. In theory, we get a deal of some form in the next 2 weeks or so. I think July 21 is the deadline that Mark Carney indicated at Kananaskis that we were going to see. But of course, we don't know what that trade deal is going to look like. It's not going to be what we had 6 months ago, which was free trade and an extremely integrated auto industry with the U.S. So if what's left behind is some form of tariffs on steel and aluminum, even if it's not at their current volumes, but just even anything above zero, it's worse than what we had. And so that will cause damage then. And it is going to encourage a production shift. The trade figures came out yesterday, and it showed that exports are down again, not surprisingly. It also showed that imports are down again, maybe a little bit surprisingly. But the reality is that as long as those tariffs remain in place, especially when it comes to manufacturing, if manufacturers realize that they should be moving to the other side of the border, I'm not entirely sure that if these tariffs go away, that they're going to move back. Moving manufacturing is extremely expensive, and it's a decades-long decision. So if you make that decision to jump, I don't think that any amount of trade deal is going to make those jobs come back or make that industry come back.
Okay, so what might constitute a win on this self-imposed deadline? I think it's the 21st of July that Mark Carney has set. What can he roll out as a win to Canadians here, if anything?
The only thing that I think that he can call a win is certainty. Even if it's just that there are now tariffs going forward and that's the way it works, then at least he can say, look, the randomness of the Trump decision-making, that the tariffs are here today, they're doubled tomorrow, they're cut in half the next day, that stuff goes away. And I think that that's the best that he can hope for at this point. He's not going to be able to come back to Canada and say, there's no tariffs and we're going back to what we had before. So anything that he comes up with is less than what we had 6 months ago. And so it is going to do damage, especially to Canadian manufacturing, not just the auto industry. The service sector might be able to escape some of this. It doesn't seem that that's where Trump's focus is. But he's clearly obsessed with this idea of blue-collar jobs and, make America great again is at least built on a nostalgia for going back to the way that the U.S. made things in the 1980s and 1990s, and that's what he wants to bring back. So Canada's the direct competition for that. I think Mark Carney's success is just saying, look, I don't know what jobs I can save here, but at least we know going forward until Trump leaves and until maybe somebody can reverse these policies, that for now we're going to have tariffs and at least they're not going to be arbitrarily decided.
Do you think that generally Canadians are a little laissez-faire about all of this because they might not have been impacted by this yet, but will?
Yes, you're absolutely right. So if you've lost your job, of course, you're going to be on the front line of realizing what damage the tariffs has done. But so far, the inflation data has been rather muted. I think Canadians were expecting that when we started hearing about 25% tariffs back in February, there was this belief that inflation was going to be 25% in March. And that's not the way it works because of these long supply chains, because of arrangements between suppliers upstream and downstream and contracts that can run months into advance. You can't necessarily reset your price at the drop of the hat. So, we're going to see that there is some sort of inflationary pressure that will eventually surface. And that's when consumers are going to realize, wait, we're in trouble here. Right now, GDP has shrunk, but only 0.1 of a percentage point. So you don't notice in a month-to-month that change. For an analogy, imagine that you're making $100 on your paycheck, and on your next paycheck you make $99.90. Would you notice that the 10 cents has gone missing? Probably not. But that's what happened to the Canadian economy in the last month that we have data for it. But accumulated over time, if that keeps falling, eventually you realize that 100 has turned into 95. Then you might start paying attention. So yes, I think that the laissez-faire attitude that you said about Canadian consumers is not because we don't care. It's that we haven't really seen the full force of it yet.
Moshe, always great. Appreciate it. Thanks, pal.
Anytime.
All right, take care. Moshe Lander, economist from Montreal's Concordia University. All right, Tim Powers when we come back. All right, it's time to talk to Tim Powers, Summa Strategies, Abacus Data, friend of the show. Tim Powers, what's going on with our New York Yankees anyway?
Swept by the now first place Toronto Blue Jays. I mean, Todd, the world's gone crazy. And look, you took away my opening line about, your poor buddy Mitchie Marner, who's leaving Toronto for tax purposes to go to Vegas. And not that I could blame him. I mean, Vegas got a better chance of winning the Cup. You and I will be 105 by the time Toronto wins a Cup.
That's true. Can't blame him at all. And I imagine the real estate agent who he's dealing with in Las Vegas is quite happy because he's probably going to purchase a pretty nice house, right?
Maybe he'll have you and me down, and we can go to the Sphere and watch a concert and take in the game. What do you think?
Sure. Have you been to Vegas, by the way, to watch hockey at all?
I have not. I've been there, but not for hockey. Not since they started. You?
Yeah. No, I haven't seen a hockey game, but I've been to Vegas 3 or 4 times, and really enjoy it. But I'd love to see a hockey game there. I think it'd be a cool venue.
It's awesome. The stadium is supposed to be fantastic. Yeah. So there you go. Maybe we'll go together. Maybe your wife will allow that, and we'll do it on a Wednesday night. So we'll do CBC from there. I'll bring you on. What do you think?
All right, sounds good. All right, so let's talk about what's happening with this digital sales tax. And Lloyd Axworthy, former Liberal Foreign Affairs Minister, accused Prime Minister Mark Carney of taking a bootlicking approach to Donald Trump at the expense of Canadian values. What are your thoughts on this?
I had the chance actually yesterday to interview Mr. Axworthy, and he wasn't holding his punches. Look, and he's got a lot of credibility, right? I mean, Mr. Axworthy, as you will know and your listeners will know, when Canada was driving that anti-landmine treaty in the late 90s, he and Mr. Chrétien were behind all of that. So it doesn't help Mark Carney at the moment, but I don't know how much it hurts him either. For all the joking you and I do about hockey and football and stuff, it's a bit like that at this moment. We don't really know if he was, on the surface it irritates people and it looks like he is bootlicking, but behind the scenes maybe it's proved to be beneficial, and Carney at least appears to be okay with taking the criticism in hopes that he gets something come the 3rd or 4th week of July.
Yeah, and Carney's not alone when it comes to world leaders and the perception of bootlicking with Donald Trump, I would say.
He's not, and look, I mean, punching this guy in the head doesn't seem to work, right? As others have tried to do. He loves the sound of his own voice, as we've said. He loves to portray himself as some magnificent outer worldly negotiator. So, you know what, if that gets you wins and Canadians benefit, then maybe we got to park our sensitivities for the moment. But we won't know, right? We are armchair quarterbacking, armchair coaching, which is what we get to do on radio, so it makes it fun, but we're not going to know till there's a deal or no deal.
How concerned do you think Canadians should be when it comes to this trade war? And it's, I mean, look, I was chatting with Moshe Lander, economist, prior to our chat, and I suggested that perhaps people have a bit of a laissez-faire attitude about this, because perhaps they've not been directly impacted by this yet, and it might hit home at some point as it expands out and hits the economy on a broader spectrum. What are your thoughts, I guess, on Canadians and this trade war? Do you think that we're taking this as seriously as we should, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was joking with Vanessa, your producer, earlier. She said, "How was your Canada?" I said it was fine, except for all the mosquito bites. And right now, I think it's a bit like a mosquito bite for people. It's there. It's a little itchy. You scratch it. You do that again. It irritates you. But then it really, it isn't a full-blown infection. And I think that's kind of the attitude right now. Look, we're with the beer company we're in a bit of a space where we're directly impacted because we buy our cans from the United States through the odd process of buying beer cans. 90% of craft brewers do that. But we were, the guys who run our business were wise enough to pre-order right on through until October. So we're not really feeling it yet, but we're concerned about it. We have employees, and I'm not saying anything would happen to them, but they're things you think about. And I think most Canadians for now are looking at alternative arrangements to travel. I'm seeing it at a really micro level. The Hockey Association that I'm involved with doesn't want teams playing in the U.S., and I'm making the argument to them that, well, I respect that. On the person-to-person level, the organization-to-organization level, let's remember that those relationships are the ones that help us get through this in the end and will repair whatever damage Trump does to the whole thing.
Yeah, as Canadians, we're looking at what's happening with the alligator Alcatraz and
God,
ice, and it's almost shock and awe at this point. And I think rightfully so. It's almost dystopian at this point. What we're seeing here.
Somebody actually walked up to me at a Tim Hortons and said that very word. He said, "You're pretty busy these days because everything's so dystopian." So people are noticing it, right? They're noticing it, and I think it's so dystopian that they're kind of checked out unless it's impacting them directly. And we all kind of have our Trump buffer, like, oh, okay, it's like last Friday he came forward with the digital services tax and he was pulling it off, and as we all said, fixed by Monday or Tuesday, bootlicking, not bootlicking. What is he going to do today? It's July 4th. I guess they're publishing the list of tariffs for that'll apply to different countries. That's the July 4th gift to the world today. So what does that mean? How irritated are we going to be? Does it affect you and me and what we do? And again, I'll go back to the point, not much yet. Though I took with great interest when the governor of Maine, as you know, she was in your neck of the woods last week, and again she's making the important point. Like, people in Maine are feeling it, and more Americans are probably feeling it because they're not seeing, particularly in the tourism side, the summer bookings and all of that yet, and that hopefully somehow gets them to, as best they can, put pressure on Trump to end the silliness.
Right. So he often says we don't need anything from Canada, including energy, cars, nothing. We don't need anything from you. Is that accurate, or what are your thoughts? I know you're not an economist, but you play one on the radio. So what are your thoughts on that?
He has more of a fixation on Canada than I do giving you a hard time about the New York Jets. So that should tell you, like, if we don't matter, why is he constantly talking about it, right? Yeah. And obviously we do. For all his irritating characteristics, he knows we're resource rich, and he knows how their economy is hummed, and he knows how their defense industry has been built. I mean, we talked about this before when they put in steel and aluminum tariffs before. The area that suffered most was the U.S. military and some of their procurement. So he doesn't care about us, but he does.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you be hesitant to travel to the United States, Tim, based on kind of your public figure and all of that? Would you have you traveled to the U.S. lately? I should ask you.
I was there just after he was elected. I was in Washington in May, and it didn't bother me. I mean, like I said, I'm trying to get my hockey team to go to New York in January. Maybe it'll all be fixed by then. So I'm on the personal level. We're Atlantic Canadians, and we have deep ties there. I don't think, I should hold my anger towards Trump against the friends and family we have in the U.S.
Yeah, I guess we hear stories about people being detained, and professors and kind of public figures, or people who may have been vocally criticizing Donald Trump, and people's getting their phone searched and all. I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. Do you have any concerns about that? Because I personally would and do.
A little bit, but then if they do that, great. They create the opportunity for me to make more points, right? Like, if you want to poke the bear, but realize that's a two-way street. You can inconvenience me. You'll find a lot of pictures of my son playing soccer and hockey on my phone. Fill your boots if you want to look at those. I mean, if that makes you happy, great. Yeah. And if you want to bully me at that level, go ahead, or bully you at that level, go ahead. But you're not helping. You're not going to silence anyone. I don't think, particularly you and I or anybody else in the world we operate by doing that. If anything, you'll inflame them further.
For sure. All right, before I let you go, it's Calgary Stampede, and we know that politicians love the Stampede, and Pierre Poilievre and company are trying to make inroads there. What are your thoughts on Poilievre trying to put on his Alberta boots again and trying to become a local boy again? Is that a tough sell?
Well, I'm in St. John's now, and I was, as you know, we have all these weird routings to get here, and I was on a plane with a bunch of people who were flying to Montreal last night to get to the Stampede because it's such a big event. Poilievre grew up in Calgary and all of that. I think the bigger sell he's going to have is how does he manage everything that's happening in Alberta through this by-election and as a representative from Alberta. Separatism, real or not, is a daily topic of discussion. Revival potentially or not of the PC party of Alberta. All of those things are going to be on his plate there, and he'll have to navigate them. And he'll win, I suspect, and he's got a fairly vocal, independent opponent who'll get some oxygen, which will bring more attention to the race. So he'll be doing some early stick handling in the summer before training camp starts.
All right, Tim, like the hockey reference. Thanks, pal.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
All right, take care. Tim Power, Summa Strategies, Abacus Data, friend of the show. This story in the Chronicle Herald: get shovels in the ground. MLA stresses urgency of Chignecto Isthmus infrastructure upgrades. Elizabeth Smith-McCrossin joins the show when we come back. All right, this story in the Chronicle Herald this week: get shovels in the ground. The headline: MLA stresses urgency of Chignecto Isthmus infrastructure upgrades. Elizabeth Smith-McCrossin, MLA, independent MLA for Cumberland North, joins us to talk about all this. Elizabeth, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, of course.
Oh, well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so what's the latest on this whole thing, and where are we? Just kind of give everybody an overview, if you will. I know that that's a broad question, but there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this is a big project. Obviously, the Chignecto Isthmus holds our critical infrastructure that connects Nova Scotia with the rest of Canada. It's our most important trade corridor, so all of our products coming in and out of the province travel through that trade corridor that goes right across the Chignecto Isthmus. We've known for quite a few years the risks, and with climate change, we're seeing increasing rising sea levels. And scientists and experts have been saying that the dike system that has been there since the Acadians needs to be reinforced and strengthened and built stronger and higher if we are going to protect that land structure of the Chignecto Isthmus. If it's not done, Todd, the experts are saying that we will see catastrophic flooding. We'll see damage to infrastructure such as telecommunications, electrical infrastructure, Trans-Canada Highway, and CN Rail. So this is very, very important, not only to the people that I represent in Cumberland County, but to all Nova Scotians, to all Canadians.
Okay, so what has been committed to this point when it comes to to money from the feds in the province?
All along, I would say, for the last 4 years, the federal government have been saying we'll pay 50%. We want the province to each pay 25%. And when they did the engineering study, that was about $700,000. That's how they divided up the cost for that too. Now, when Premier Houston came into power, he came out and said that he didn't want Nova Scotia to have to pay for any of it. He wanted it to be paid 100% by the federal government. To be honest, Todd, a lot of my constituents agree with that. And I'm not opposed to that. However, the federal government have said no. They've been pretty adamant that they're paying 50%. And they wanted the provinces to make a commitment for 25. Premier Houston said no, and he put it before the Court of Appeals to make a decision on that. And you are likely aware of this. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Court of Appeals here in Nova Scotia, as our highest court, came out saying that they, I don't have the exact quote, but in general, they said that they weren't prepared to make a decision on that because they felt it was political. They didn't feel it was proper use of the courts because it was a political decision of who is to pay. And my stance on it is this. We need the work to get started. Stop fighting about who's going to pay. There's one taxpayer, and the taxpayers need this work to get done. So the fact is there was a memorandum of understanding signed back in March between our Minister of Public Works, Fred Tilley, which is great, as well as the Premier of New Brunswick and Dominic LeBlanc from the federal government, and agreeing to the pay structure of what the feds have said, 25, 25, and 50. So we need to stop the delays. That's my point. When Premier Houston became Premier, he said the work will be done in 10 years, and we keep hearing 10 years, and we're not actually getting the work started. So what I've asked for is for a website, for some accountability and transparency on the project. The public should be consulted. There should be public meetings. There should be meetings with local stakeholders, like including CN, including local municipal governments. And at any time, someone from the public, including you or I, should be able to go on a website and say, okay, the project's 10 years in length. Where are they at? I know the Minister of Public Works last week told media that it's in the engineering phase. That's very vague. I think people deserve to have more information.
All right. Who would this would be a political committee, or who might chair it, I suppose, and would participation be required? Would it be obligatory, or because again, can you call CN to participate, or can you force these stakeholders to participate in a committee like this?
Well, they want to. I've actually had conversations with CN about this topic for about 7 years, actually. They're very concerned. There's one spot, you've probably seen that famous picture that's used a lot by different media, by different journalists. Mm-hmm. It's actually on the New Brunswick side, but the only thing stopping the Bay of Fundy is the CN rail line, which is actually on one of the dikes.
Right, yeah.
And during one of the storms, the water from the Bay of Fundy is right up against that. But no, there's actually already a bit of a governance structure in place, but it's not public knowledge. The only reason I know about it is I found it from a PowerPoint presentation I found from when someone from government presented at a conference in Quebec a few months ago. Mm-hmm. But so there is a governance structure in place with project leads from each province, but this is information that should be readily available and accessible for anyone that's interested. The money that's being used to fix the isthmus is taxpayers' money, and that information should be available to taxpayers of where the project's at. But honestly, my biggest concern, Todd, is we need to get the work done before there's catastrophic damage and before Nova Scotia loses our trade corridor.
Okay, so might the provincial government pony up and start this construction as the headline reads, get shovels in the ground, and then pay for it, borrow the money, whatever, and then ask and figure out how to get money from the feds after the fact? Is that what you're saying here?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we have money here, make it a priority. Like, it should probably be the biggest priority for the provincial government, considering if we were to lose our critical infrastructure piece, everything is threatened here. Like our food supply, inventory, our supply chain would be broken. So this should be the number one priority for this provincial government right now, and we're not seeing that. When it comes to money, the reality is when you look at our Nova Scotia budget, it's over $16 billion, Todd. And over $6 billion of our budget actually comes through federal transfer payments. So not here to defend the federal government, but I will say we are already getting $6 billion from the federal government. So, my message to the Premier is, out of that $6 billion, find $162 million from that and get the work done for the Chignecto Isthmus. This project needs to be made a priority for the protection of all Nova Scotians and for our critical trade corridor.
Right, but again, so I guess the answer is yes. You're suggesting that we pay for it, and then see if we can recoup some more of that money from the feds, or because right now the feds have committed to paying for half, right?
That's right, exactly. And New Brunswick has committed to pay for 25%, and we've actually committed to pay for 25% in March. Right. There was an MOU signed and agreed but we're not seeing any work started. So, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, it was in 10 years the project will be done. It's a 10-year project, but now it's 2025 and we're still saying it's a 10-year project. We need to get a starting date for this project. And so if the starting date is September of 2025, then we know when the end date is, and it should be 10 years. We all know what can happen with government projects. Sometimes they balloon, the escalating costs, their timelines are not always met. So, what I'm saying, Todd, is we need accountability. We need to hold government to account to get the work done on budget and on time. I think 10 years is a pretty long timeline. But if that's what the experts are saying, let's stop delaying the beginning of the project. Let's get the project started so that we can start this 10-year project now.
Yeah, and as somebody just emailed me, I think they make a good point. So Newfoundland also relies on the isthmus because of the ferry terminal in Sydney, which is a great point, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. No, this is very, very, very important. And if you look back at the history, we've seen pretty severe flooding along the isthmus. From the Great Saxby Gale was the worst, and there were people that died in that flood. And about a third of the town of Amherst was under flooding, and Sackville as well. So we know it from the past what can happen, but scientists and experts are predicting much worse. And they're saying it's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. So let's get the work done now. We've seen what's happened, right? If you think back in British Columbia a few years ago, Fraser Valley, experts had predicted that there was going to be damage done there if preventative work wasn't done, and they didn't get it done, and it ended up costing a lot more money to repair things than get the work done preventatively to prevent damage.
Right. Okay, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Great chat. Thank you. We'll do it again.
Okay. Good talking to you, Todd. Take care.
All right. Take care. You got it. Elizabeth Smith-McCrossin, MLA for Cumberland North. Now, what is on your mind? The way to reach us for the open hour is 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. A lot of talk yesterday about affordability or lack thereof in Nova Scotia and in particular HRM. If you want to talk about that, you can certainly do so. Also talking about e-bikes and e-scooters and an interesting story about a 42-year-old man charged with impaired driving after driving an e-bike in Amherst recently. We'll get to that and whatever else you have in your mind. 902-405-6000. Your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls. The way to reach us, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Affordability is something that's been on the mind of a lot of people because we talked about it yesterday in light of this story that I read off the CBC website. I'll just read a bit of it. Again, this from yesterday. The share of income Halifax households typically spend on housing and transportation costs in 2024 was comparable to cities like Toronto, according to recent Stats Canada data analyzed by CBC. Half of households in Halifax were estimated to spend about 31% or more of before-tax income on those two expense categories. In Toronto, the figure was 30%. So I read this part of the story yesterday and got a lot of response from people. A lot of people wanted to talk about it and share their experience and their frustration. And I received some emails as well. I'll read one of the emails, and then we'll go to the phones. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. This email from a listener says, I won't say where specifically, but I've been working full-time with the municipality for the past 8 years. I make a decent income and do have a pension and unionized job, but with the amount of deduction and taxes from my paycheck, I only bring home about half of what I earn. I got hired a couple of years ago before COVID, had the chance to get myself out of debt and buy a car. I was looking forward to saving for a down payment for a small mini home. Since COVID, prices of everything has gone through the roof. I still live in an older building in North Dartmouth. Granted, I do live alone with one single income, but I certainly couldn't afford to move to a new apartment if I ever had to move. I've lost hope of ever comfortably purchasing a mini home. At this point, my main goal now is to just not to just have to get a roommate. I just want to keep living alone in my old apartment. I've definitely had to move the goalposts in my life because of the cost of living. I feel bad for younger people just starting to make their way now. So there you go, folks. That's a good example right there, in my opinion, of somebody who once, not that long ago, would have been pretty well set up, working for the municipality with a pension job and unionized job. So she's making decent money. And you would think that somebody in that position, again, would be able to at least be able to buy a small, modest home. But she can't. And I think that this story speaks to a lot of people's experience. And you can imagine somebody working for minimum wage or not much above minimum wage, how difficult it would be to survive. And again, these are some of the frustrations that I'm hearing from people, and perhaps you want to share your story about all of this. Also, something else, and then we'll go right to the phones. Another CBC story, a 42-year-old man charged recently with impaired driving after an e-bike was seen weaving in and out of traffic in Amherst, forcing several vehicles to pull to the side of the road. The reason why I bring this up, folks, is because, look, I don't want to pile on, and I get that probably the vast majority of people on e-bikes follow the rules. But it doesn't take very many to spoil it for the rest of everybody else. And I think too often we see people driving these vehicles much too fast, in and out of traffic, on the sidewalk, and not obeying the rules of the road. And e-scooters, I think, are worse. They're hard to spot. They're hard to see. You see them zipping by you in and out of traffic, up onto the sidewalk, down off the sidewalk at a rapid speed. I don't know what the top speed of these vehicles are, but they're much faster than any pedal bike could ever go. And I think that we need to perhaps have some special designation if you're going to operate one of these vehicles, because they are a motorized vehicle. And there's a liability issue, in my opinion. If you're going to be driving a motorized vehicle, and that's what they are for all intents and purposes, in traffic, perhaps we need to look at a special designation and examine liability from an insurance perspective as well. Who's liable if you get into an accident with one of these things? And are e-scooters even safe? I can't imagine the risk that you take on when you jump on an e-scooter and you start darting in and out of traffic. What are your thoughts on this, folks? Or anything else you got in your mind? And again, the way to reach is 902-405-6000. Let's kick it off with John. Hello, John.
How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. Todd, happy Friday.
Yes, indeed.
First of all, when it comes to the affordability, this has been going on for years. People got to wake up and start realizing that we were number 4 in the list in 2000 as the most costly city in the country, right? So we were only behind Calgary, Toronto, and Vancouver. Right? It was in Statistics Canada. It was all there. I read it myself. It was there where we were. Now we're behind Toronto, right? Or just equivalent. Now with this other thing that just came out the other day, the 15% tax that we pay higher than all the other provinces, we've been robbed of a lot of money, and people can't afford. This goes into the housing thing. Can't afford these new prices that have changed everything since the pandemic. Fear, right? And everyone's just fearful that they got a little cubicle, or a little roof over their head now. They don't care where they live as long as they got something. Well, that's not right. That's not the way to live. You should be able to afford to be able to buy a mini home like that guy said, right? I mean, he has a decent job, right? But the cost of everything coming home is only half. This is not right. This is, something's got to give. I don't know what it is, what we have to do, but I think it's time for Nova Scotians to start standing up and saying, hey, enough's enough, right? When it comes to Nova Scotia, secondly, I want to mention Nova Scotia Power. Nova Scotia Power has to be responsible for what they've done to us. I have a friend that lost everything. He just sold his house just not that long ago, 6 months ago, and everything's gone. Everything. Not a cent in his accounts, right? Who's responsible? The bank's responsible. Nova Scotia Power responsible. And not to say that they can't have a lawsuit, that's not right. A lawsuit has to be applied, right? They have to take the onus of this, not the taxpayers. Why would the taxpayers pay for their own thing? That's just stupidity, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to stand up. We have to stand up and say enough's enough. We're not going to be having to put up with this anymore. I think the Premier is right when it comes to resources. We have to dig in and make something available that we could get money so that we are not a have-not province anymore. And that is to do a little bit of uranium digging or gold, whatever. If it's only, as long as the environment is looked at a decent amount, not these ridiculous standards where you cut like the gold mine out in Middle Muscat, gone, right? Because of all the environmental restrictions. There's got to be a give and take here because we have to get out of this have-not province bullshit.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
Anyway.
Okay, John. All right. Thanks for the call. Look, folks, we say stand up. What does that look like? What does it look like to stand up? How do you stand up and say enough's enough? And to me, it's you probably leave the province. That's the way you make your voice heard. How else could you make it heard? I mean, politically, the premier's got a super majority, and he would say he's got a large mandate. So what do? Do you stop paying taxes? You can't stop paying taxes. We elect this government that's been rewarded. We're in the highest tax jurisdiction in North America, the worst GDP per ratio in North America. How do you stand up? I mean, we all demand services. We all want health care. We all want free lunch, literally in schools, free lunch program. Somebody's got to pay for all this. And I don't know, what does standing up look like? 902-405-6000. Tim, hello.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
I'm well, you?
Very good. Listen, a number of things have been talked about, but the simplicity and the affordability within or throughout Atlantic Canada is gone. In my opinion, that rests solely with the elected officials, be it provincially or municipally. We heard yesterday through the Fraser Institute the highest provincial income tax in Canada. That's telling because, to your point a moment ago, the Premier has a super majority. He's in a position where he could lower that and make a significant impact for the better on the residents of Nova Scotia, yet he chooses not to, or thus far he's chose not to. The question is why? Be it telecommunications, the piping, the water, the infrastructure, we're going to be ending up at some point we're going to spend millions upon millions of dollars. And can we afford that? The short answer is no. And then the question will be, what if? And, we're talking about the isthmus in about the cost of that. The longer we kick stuff down the road, the more expensive it becomes. And yet the elected politicians are sitting back. I'm not sure what they're doing, but it's creating an adverse impact on the residents of Nova Scotia, and that's truly unfortunate. What we can do, call, email, make them accountable. At some point, they've been elected to do the job to create a better environment for the residents of Nova Scotia.
Yeah, and look, Tim, they've talked about gas tax reducing the provincial portion of the sales tax on gasoline. That's never happened, right? To me, that would be something that would help directly, but that's never happened.
Well, to your point, no, it hasn't happened. But the Premier reduced the GST, I think, by 1%.
Yep.
Has that had any impact? I'm sure minor, but at the end of the day, he's in a position right now where he could make a significant improvement to reduce taxes, to create a better environment for the residents of Nova Scotia. Yet he chooses not to. And I'm not sure why, but at some point, I hear more and more people talking about the expense of Nova Scotia and what they're being forced to do. At some point, what are people selected to do? And it's truly unfortunate because this is a beautiful place to live, but people aren't going to stay if it's not affordable, and they're going to go. And the question is where they're going to go. The most expensive provincial income tax in Canada. That's telling and unfortunate at best.
Okay, Tim, thanks for the call. Take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. That is the way to reach us. Hello, Bill.
Hey there.
Hi there.
Hi, it's Phil, not Bill.
Oh, sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
Hey, no worries. Let's just a quick one. I think our Jets are going to finish at least 500. How about that?
500. That means not another playoff year missed. That's what that means.
Well, at least I live in reality.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So just to touch on this bike thing again, and I know that whoever did the show on Canada, he did a great job. I might add. I know that a few of the councillors are gung ho to get these bike lanes going and so on, and want that money allocated, but along with more bike lanes doesn't alleviate traffic. I'm so gung ho for carpooling and so on and designated. I'd rather take 100 vehicles off the road or off the downtown, we'll call it, infrastructure. I mean, I think you'll make it easier on whether it's commuting or delivery people or so on and so forth, than, trying to add more bike lanes. You take 100 vehicles off the road and put them in a carpool, well, I'm pretty sure that's going to make an impact just downtown. And I'm glad that Philmer, I know we want to spend money. I know that. But how about we, realistically, that's my opinion, but I think that's what they should be looking at. I don't think the bike lane is not exactly wrong, but I think it's the people that are downtown, who live downtown, who are going to benefit more than people who are commuting from outlying areas, like whether it's Clayton Park, Spryfield, and so on and so on. Like, if they commute, then they need to take a shower and so forth, wherever kind of job they got to go to. And unfortunately, it's only a seasonal thing. There's, whereas the carpooling is 365.
Yeah, and transit as well. If we could get our transit working properly, to me that would be a much better use of our resources and time and energy. Getting transit properly working and reliable, to me, that is a better use of resources.
Right, and again, for me, that's just a piece of the puzzle that's really kind of not fully talked about. I know they want to make everybody happy or try and make people happy, but in the long run, in the masses, I think that's the solution. Unfortunately, and that's just one guy's opinion. Unfortunately.
Okay, Bill, that's what the show's about. One person's opinion. Thanks for the call.
All right, have a good day.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. William, hello.
Oh, hi, Todd. Hope you're great.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Listen, yesterday I live out in West Jador, and I went into the NSLC to get some cold beer, and there's a sign up on the door. I hadn't been in there since before Canada Day, saying that it's closing July the 12th. So not even 2 weeks' notice, they're closing our NSLC. I've been here for 9 years, and it's been there ever since. It probably goes back another 20 years that it's been there. Apparently the sales are fine. It's only open 6 days a week. They don't sell cannabis there. It's just a liquor outlet. And apparently there's a dispute with the landlord or something like this, but they got no plans to replace it. And what's happening as a result is they're expecting us all to drive to Porter's Lake, which is another 21 kilometers from our location. So when you factor that in, that's an extra 42 kilometers that you have to go extra just to get your alcohol. And imagine the affordability on that. What does 42 kilometers add to a case of beer or a bottle of spirits? I think it's devastating to our community. And I called Ken Smith, who's the MLA. I called David Hemsby. I called everyone, Claudia, Ian Rankin, anyone to help us get our NSLC back. And again, I speculate maybe it has something to do with the privatization. Maybe we're the guinea pig that the first privatized location is going to be in our area. But there's no answers, and there's a short turnaround before it's closed. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to say it's privatization is not a done deal, and there are groups that oppose it, of course, but there are certainly groups that support it, including convenience store owners, and that. So yeah, I would say that perhaps they're looking at the writing on the wall, and you have I assume you've got a convenience store, gas store type thing in your area.
Yeah, there's a convenience store in the same plaza as the NSLC. But, again, people have to realize that those outlets are going to be more expensive. It's not going to be as cheap as going to the NSLC. They're buying it from the NSLC, right? So that'll add more to the cost of buying a six-pack of cold beer or spirits as well. So, I mean, in terms of affordability, I got to go, Jador, the community is like around a harbor, just like downtown Halifax, and I live down the end of one of the harbors, and so again, like it's 11 kilometers now to get to the liquor store, add another 21, and then double it to come home. That's, probably at least $10 in gas. Yeah, it's crazy.
I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware of that. So it's closing in 9 days, you say?
Yeah, July the 12th, and this is like a waterfront community. Martinique Beach, Provincial Beach, is in the Musquodoboit area. That's part of our community. It's just unreasonable that they're doing this without. They should be moving in a trailer, like in some rural communities that have beach areas. They move in the summer. They put a temporary location up so they can have at least some service for campers and things like that. They have no plan to do anything like that as of yet, and we're going to be left with no NSLC. And again, this is a very vibrant, strong community, and to not have this is going to be, housing prices are probably going to drop.
Okay, William, thanks for the call.
Hey, bye.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. The open hour continues when we come back. All right, continuing with your calls, 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Here's an email from Robin. Then we'll go back to the phones. Robin writes about affordability. Says, I've been a rotational worker living in Nova Scotia and working in Alberta for 12 years now. Between the travel and taxes, I'm finally done with it. Next year, we are moving to Alberta. Taxes alone will save me over $20,000, let alone the travel. I have long lobbied the Nova Scotia government to give some kind of incentive for rotational workers like myself, as we bring a lot of tax dollars into Nova Scotia. Besides the beauty of this province, there is no real benefit of living here anymore. I think it's time to leave and enjoy the advantages of another province. Even housing is basically a wash with Alberta now. Kind of sad, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's from Robin. So yeah, folks, affordability and or lack thereof in this province, and we talked a lot about it yesterday, and people are talking about it again today, receiving emails. That is something that you can weigh in on if you so choose to do so. 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. E-bikes also something that I brought up in light of the fact that the CBC story this morning, a 42-year-old man recently charged with impaired driving after driving an e-bike. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think that perhaps we need to, well, I don't think perhaps, I think we definitely need enforcement when it comes to e-bikes and e-scooters not following the rules of the road. In particular, e-scooters, traveling at pretty high speed, darting in and out of traffic, up and down off the sidewalk. Too often we see this. Again, not everybody, probably the majority plays by the rules. But it doesn't take very many to tip the apple cart over, and that is unfortunately what's going on here. So what are your thoughts on that? 902-405-6000. Again, 902-405-6000. Jim, hello.
Good morning, Todd.
Hi there.
I'd like to expand on Bill Mont's idea yesterday about the grain elevators.
Okay.
I think he wanted to put some business advertising on there. I remember calling in Raquel's show years ago, and Wayne Mason was on there, and I suggested this idea to him that it would be, when you're coming into the harbor in a cruise ship or a container ship or something like that, that's one of the first things you see would be those container piers, and they were so, I always thought, they were so ugly, brown and yellowish color. They might have been painted since then, but I'd like to see a nice mural painted on there with to include the diversity of our city and country, and the Immigration Museum is close by there. Have a big mural on those. I know it's going to cost money. That was what Wayne said. It's a good idea, but it costs too much money. But it would be real nice to show people coming into our city how diverse and inclusive we are, and somebody could come up with a collage of faces, different colors, old and new, and things like that. Maybe with Ruth Goldblum in the center, because she started that Immigration Museum there at Pier 21, which is only across the street. That would be a great idea, and get rid of a big eyesore that's down at the beginning of the harbor, and I think it would be a great idea. What do you think?
Well, sure, why not, right? I think it would be a good idea. Lots of visibility there, and it certainly would grab people's attention, that's for sure, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And another thing I'm going to let you go, before I let you go, I travel the 103 a lot coming from Halifax into exit 4 or 5 there. And I sure do hope that the provincial government has a plan to grind that down and repave it, because that is an absolute mess. I don't know if you traveled it lately, but especially between exit 3 and 4, it's just it's bum, 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 all the way through. So I know the province is going to be done. It will be already in the works. So if it's not already done, it's got to be done soon, next year at the latest.
Yeah, a lot of our roads are in dire, desperate condition, Jim. It's really an embarrassment, actually, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's one of the worst. The major artery coming in, leaving the city, going in on the other side is not so bad. But I know lots of people listen to your show. You're the #1 rated show in the country in this time slot, and that's a credit to you and Vanessa and Dan, and I want to throw that in there too. You're doing a great job. I think you're the best talk show host Halifax ever had.
Jim, that's very kind of you, pal. Very kind of you.
You're the best. And all the names that were previous to you, like Steve Murphy and Rick Howe, of course, and Andrew Crystal and Jordy Morgan and Tom Young you were producing for, and we had that guy coming in from Ottawa. Do you remember Graham Greene?
I don't, no.
Oh, my God. He used to tell Tom Young used to hang up on people, but Graham Greene used to put a hat on your head, sir, and take a walk into the ocean. Keep walking until the hat starts floating.
Oh, God.
That was fun.
Well, Jim, listen, thanks for your kind words, pal. I appreciate it very much.
You're welcome. You deserve it. Thank you.
Okay, bud. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. 902-405-6000. Let's talk to Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hi, Todd.
Hi there.
Look, I just want to talk about the bike lanes a little bit. Full disclosure, I mean, my wife has a car, I have a pickup truck, and I have a bicycle. I use all three in the city, and I'm a proponent of the bike lanes. I bicycle to work most days downtown. It's I live on the peninsula, so I can get in and out of downtown pretty easy. So it's not even a hardship, but where there's not bike lanes, like the Cogswell interchange was a mess before. Now it's going to be much better. So, you feel safer. But, everybody, I hear on the show, everybody calling all the time, nobody's in those bike lanes. So I was reading an article here a couple weeks ago, and it's those little scooters with the blue helmets and stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of them active, but I see them parked everywhere. So, sort of the same concept. I don't see them being used. The guy that owns that, there was an interview with him, and he said in the first 6 weeks, and I don't like to put you on the spot, could you guess how many kilometers those things have gone in Halifax in the first 6 weeks? So say May 1st to mid-June? Just give me a number.
I wouldn't even be able to begin to estimate what it would be, Tim. What's the number?
Yeah. 37,000 kilometers were driven.
Mm-hmm.
And that floored me because I'm thinking, that's like, and when I'm in the bicycle routes, I see a lot of bicycles, I see pedestrians, I hardly ever see them. And they rode 37,000 kilometers. Now you think how many Ubers did that replace? I don't know if it replaced any cars. I think people that take them are probably, more apt to hop on a bus or an Uber, but how many Uber trips would that replace? How many, so these things, if that was 37,000 kilometers in 6 weeks, how many kilometers are being, and I'm replacing a vehicle when I drive, and then cost. Everybody says, well, bicycles don't pay their way. I don't understand that because I pay my property taxes, and last I checked, the city collects money through property taxes. Yeah. So I'm paying property taxes. I have vehicles licensed. I'm paying all my taxes. And so I think I'm paying for bicycle lanes. Like, in fairness, my taxes are upgrading the Windsor Street Exchange at an enormous cost.
Yeah.
But it's no benefit to me because I live on the peninsula. Yet people that maybe live in Hants County are going to get a better Windsor Street Exchange, and they don't even contribute to it through Halifax tax base.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as far as a license plate on a bicycle, sure, go for it. I had somebody rear ended my car a couple of years ago, and there was witnesses, and everybody is like, oh, I got a couple numbers of the license plate of the car that left.
Mm.
That's a big license plate. You imagine a license plate on a bicycle. Like, if that's the solution, and we're all liable for damages. So if I hit somebody with my bicycle, and I'm liable, I'm still liable, but you're not required to have like $1 million insurance on a bicycle. I can't imagine how a bicycle could ever cause $1 million worth of damage, whereas a car could drive through a storefront.
Well, physical damage, you could run somebody over. I'm not saying that would be the case, but if you're driving an e-bike, and I don't know what the top rated speed for an e-bike is, but I see these things flying by my vehicle all the time in traffic, and I would think, Tim, at some point with the rate of speed you're in traffic, would we perhaps not look at liability and the potential for insurance if you're driving a motorized vehicle in traffic?
Yeah, no, and I'll tell you, you make a good point, and I think when your callers brought up about the e-bikes, so I'm in the bicycle lanes, and I think there's rules somewhere saying you can only have an e-bike that's so powerful. Like, I've seen some of these, they look like motorcycles.
Yeah.
And I've seen them coming across the bridge and this sort of thing. Like, yeah, you're right. If that hit a person or hit me on my bicycle, yeah, I'm not sure that would be a fun exchange of body parts and metal.
Yeah.
So maybe there is that. And I think one of your callers just mentioned about policing it, and I'd like to see some policing in those lanes. But I mean, how do we set that up? And anyway, I mean, there's Halifax Police used to have bicycles. I don't know if they still do.
Yeah, I think they might still have. I think I've seen some officers on bikes down on the peninsula.
Yeah. But anyway, I just constantly hear people on this show, and I know you have a certain audience of callers. I think your audience is broad, but I think you're limited to the number of people call in. You've even said it. People don't call in to say, "Hey, I like it."
No, that's right. People generally call to complain. That's the reality, right?
Yeah, but literally, there's a few counters in these bike lanes, and I know where some of them are. I might hit one. Depending, like when I go downtown, I know I hit one in the Hollis Street bike lane. But you can go online and see them every day, how many counters are being hit. And it's thousands a week. Like, people are using them, and the numbers are going way up. But I thought that was a crazy example that 37,000 kilometers were driven on those little rentals that I hardly ever see. So, people are using them. And I'm not a young man, Todd. I'm a veteran, like you. I did my 30 years, and now I'm working a second job in industry, and use my bicycle, trying to keep the weight off.
Right on.
Trying to stay healthy.
Okay, Tim, listen, I appreciate your perspective. I truly do. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care. 902-405-6000. We'll continue with your calls when we come back. All right, taking your calls, 902-405-6000. Quick email from Carl and back to the phones. Carl says, if someone drives my car and gets in an accident, my auto insurance is liable. Does the same liability apply to rental bikes and scooters? Does the rental firm carry insurance for rentals? And that's a good question, and I don't know the answer. If you, I'm sure that you sign a waiver when you rent one of these e-scooters or e-bikes. And what does that cover if you get in an accident or you cause serious damage to somebody or somebody's property, which could easily happen, and I'm sure has happened and will happen? Who's liable? I think these are legitimate questions. 902-405-6000. Bernie, hello.
Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I'm well. You?
Good. I was just telling Todd that I hear a lot of people around there complaining about this and complaining about that. You had a provincial election in Nova Scotia over a year ago, and it gives Houston a majority government. He could do anything he wants. We just had a federal election across this country, and they give Carney and the Liberals a handsome minority government. I'll just say we had a champion in this country, and it was Jagmeet Singh. The things he fought for when he was in power, and he with a very limited amount of seats, dental care, pharmacare, food program, anti-scab legislation, and the people of this country went out and they wiped them out. Now they got a majority government in Nova Scotia. He can do what he wants to do. They got Carney in Ottawa, nobody can touch, and God knows when he's going to sell out to this country to please Donald Trump. So I just, when it comes right down to it, I blame the electorate. They had their chance, and they put their feet in their own fire.
Well, Jagmeet Singh didn't even win his own riding, Bernie. That says something, doesn't it?
Todd, the way this election was going, the way Donald Trump was running the election in Canada, he had no choice. He was going to be defeated. But the thing is, it was a damn shame that across this country, for the things that man stood up and fought for, with a limited amount of seats in the House of Commons, that the people in this country defeated him, and not only that, but reduced his party to nothing. Now you got no voice in the country that will speak up for the ordinary people. When the pandemic was on, I said they should have put on price controls after the pandemic, and you wouldn't have been charged through the nose for rent and groceries and everything else for the cost of living. So I blame the electorate themselves. They can blame themselves. They can talk about politicians all they want and everything like that, but when they had a choice, they put their own feet in the fire.
Okay, Bernie, appreciate your comments. Thanks for the call. 902-405-6000. Jeannie, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Going well, you?
Good. I wanted to talk about someone called in yesterday. I think his name was Scott, and I agree with everything that he said, talking about how people do need to be more responsible with their money. A lot of people do live beyond their means, and he talked about being credit poor, taking out as much credit as he can, and I completely agree with that. Similar to him and his wife, so my husband and I, when we bought our first home, it was 2008. We were approved for $550 by the bank, but we had set a budget for ourselves for $300 just based on what the payments would be and that sort of thing. And we decided on a house, and when we went to the bank to say, here's the house we decided on, we would like the mortgage, our banker laughed at us, and he said, no, you don't want this tiny house. You could get something bigger. You've been approved for more. And we said, yeah, but if we lose our jobs or if I get pregnant, go on mat leave, we won't be able to make the payments. And he said, that's what credit and parents are for.
Wow.
And and we were like, no, we never ask our parents for money, and we don't live on credit. So we decided on the house, even though he kept trying to push us to go higher and bigger and all of this stuff. And he was like, you guys will be fine and all this. We stuck to our guns. Thankfully, we bought this tiny, crappy house in Toronto. It was the smallest, crappiest house in a good neighborhood of Toronto. So it was a 2-bed, 1-bath on a slab. So tiny. We decided on that one because it was a detached house. So in the future, if anyone wants to smash and rebuild, that's there's the potential for that. But also the school that was in that district. So eventually we did have kids, and the school that they went to was attached to a swimming pool and an ice rink, which then was part of their gym class. Like they would go swimming for gym, they would go ice skating for gym. So all the kids got to learn all of these things for free as part of their education, and it was a public school. It wasn't a private school. We are now mortgage free. We moved to Nova Scotia 5 years ago. We now have a house 3 times the size, and we have no mortgage, no consumer debt, no nothing. And we always tell our kids, when it comes time for you to ever own a home, if you do, don't expect your first house to be like this one. Expect it to be like the first house we lived in.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, Jeannie. Sounds like you handled it well. Thanks for the call and sharing your story.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Joe, hello.
Hello, Todd.
Hi there.
Just wanted to talk a little bit about the e-bikes, but your last caller was spot on too. I know a buddy, and he can handle himself. And I ran across him, and we were chatting, and his face was blue completely on one side. And I just said to him, I'd hate to see what the other guy looked like. And he said, nope, I rented an e-bike, and he smashed it. And I guarantee he had a concussion from it. And I don't know the specifics of the accident, whether he was, someone hit him or he hit somebody else or it was just an incident. But, I'd say that's the less severe of what could happen. I mean, there's no seatbelts, like there isn't on pedal bikes either. But, the other day I saw a guy cross the street and he was on an e-bike and he was like, it was a short, like it was on the Herring Cove Road. It was from like Dentist to the other side of Herring Cove Road. So that's, maybe 25 meters. And he was coming off, the light turned and he hit his gas or whatever, not gas, but the accelerator, and fell off his bike right in the crosswalk, just starting. And, I guarantee there's so many other incidents like that. What can happen to somebody? Like, obviously pedal bikes, they know this as well, but like they don't have an accelerator. Like it's, you're under your own power. And, to see this guy's face, you would swear he got beat by Mike Tyson.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, like the repercussion of what can happen with like not having a license. Like you don't need a license to rent one of these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you don't need to be qualified. You can pick one up and go. Like, what is that? Like, honestly, what is that? Like, that's the lack of accountability between the company, the province, and the municipality. Like, I mean, that fire that happened down the valley the other day, I mean, yeah, it was probably an internet bike. They're not as reliable, but man, like, the province needs to step up. The municipality needs to step up and say, listen, like, this is what can happen to you. You can die straight up. And I mean, everybody knows that when they get in a car. If you like, there's like the last weekend, how many head-on collisions happened? But like, a serious hand needs to come down and say, you know what? Like, this isn't a safe operation of any vehicle. It's not safe. It's not. I mean, it's safe enough if you're in a park or on a desolate street, like you're at your own repercussion. But man, like what can happen to people? It can screw up your family. It can mess up your own life for the rest of your life. Like, I mean, like we all know that when we get in a car too, but for the majority that are commuting, yeah, most of the things are bumper related. Like, I mean, right. It's but what can happen to you? The province can't just be like, okay, go rent them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it can't happen that way.
Yeah, but it is happening, right? That's the reality.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so no, it can't happen though. Like, it can't. For the province to just throw their hands up in the air and go, "We're making money on this" or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, or even for the families, right? Like, I mean, yeah, what can happen is pretty bad.
Yeah.
So,
okay, Joe.
Have a great weekend, Todd, and go Jays.
Okay, pal. All right, take care. Yeah, good calls, everybody. We appreciate it very much. We'll open the phone lines again Monday between 11 and 12. Speaking of taxation, I referenced the Fraser Institute's report on Canada, or rather Nova Scotia, and being the highest personal income tax rates in Canada. We'll talk about this when we come back. All right, at $50,000 of income, taxpayers in this province, along with Newfoundland and Labrador and Prince Edward Island, face the highest marginal provincial income tax rates in Canada, according to a new study published by the Fraser Institute. Joining us to talk about all this is Alex Whalen of the Fraser Institute. Alex, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Good afternoon, Todd. Glad to be with you again.
All right, so it's, I hate to bring bad news on a Friday, but this is sobering news. And why is it important for people to be aware of this information?
Absolutely. I think it's extremely important that people understand the tax burden that's placed upon them by governments. After all, governments are spending money on our behalf. But if you look at what do Nova Scotians want, I think Nova Scotians want a strong provincial economy, and they want to maximize their after-tax incomes. And taxes are the largest expense for the average Canadian family, so this matters very much.
Well, that's a sad commentary, eh? Taxes are the biggest expense for a Canadian family. And look, we've almost become numb to this, and I suppose we don't realize that this isn't the case everywhere in North America, right?
That's right. There's a huge difference between the tax burden faced here in Nova Scotia and around Atlantic Canada, where taxes are among the highest in North America. Certainly, if you look out across Canada, there are provinces that have lower tax rates than we see in this part of the country. But when you broaden the analysis out to North America, there are really stark differences. And that makes a difference not only in people's after-tax income, but it makes a difference in where people choose to locate. And so the heavy tax burden is certainly a barrier in terms of attracting people and businesses to our province as well.
All right. What about the argument that I don't mind paying taxes if I'm getting services which are comparable in return? Does that float at all, or what?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's about what are we getting for the taxes that we pay. And when you look out at various measures, and the Institute has produced a number of studies on the core services of government. If you look at most provinces, healthcare and education combined for upwards of 70% of provincial budgets. And I think when you look at healthcare wait times, in this region, you look at student performance in the government education system, I think there's lots of data to question what we're getting for our money. And I would also say that the economic literature is quite clear that it's not always the case that more government leads to better outcomes. In fact, once you have a government as large as we have here in Nova Scotia, government tends to reduce economic outcomes, reduce economic growth. And so there can be gains from having smaller government as well, particularly when it comes to living standards.
All right. So the public sector in general, federally, certainly we know that we've got a bloated public sector, at least that's my opinion. And I think empirical data would back that up. But we often hear the argument that those are good paying jobs and that's an economy in and of itself and an important part of local economy. And I think here in Nova Scotia, you would agree that it plays an important role in the economic vibrancy. What's your response to those who say that it although it's a cost, it also manifests itself back into the economy through good paying jobs and et cetera?
Well, there's no question that government employees pay taxes and that by and large they have high salaries. But I think it's very important to understand that wealth in an economy is generated by the private sector, and the government inherently extracts wealth from the economy to fund itself. And of course, we need governments to provide core services and things of that nature. But what I think is very important to understand in a province like Nova Scotia is that our government is much larger than we see across the country, and that even reducing the size of government down to the national average would produce massive savings that could translate into tax relief, back to the subject of our study this week.
Why do you think it doesn't happen? Why does that not happen?
Well, I have to give the government some credit here. They have made some tax changes the last few years. There was a not well understood, but I think very important change the government made to index personal income tax brackets to inflation. That was positive. In the more recent budget, they eliminated bridge tolls, they lowered the HST, they increased the basic personal exemption. Those things do provide some savings for Nova Scotia families. I think the research is quite clear that that's not nearly enough to solve Nova Scotia's tax problem. And in the long run, if we're going to see meaningful tax reform, we need a smaller size of government. All of which is to say, I do think governments understand this is an issue. Nova Scotia's finance minister 2 budgets ago said that the number one piece of feedback that he heard in consultations leading up to the budget was that Nova Scotians wanted tax relief. But what I would say to that is that if we're going to have meaningful and long-term tax relief, we need to rein in government spending.
All right. So smaller public sector, would that translate into fewer services or not as good a service?
Not necessarily. I mean, when you go back to something we discussed a few moments ago, healthcare and education is roughly 70-75% of the provincial budget. And one of the things that we do at the Institute is we look out across the country and around the world. How is healthcare delivered? How is education delivered? And what we see is that there are plenty of lessons to be learned from other jurisdictions that are getting better outcomes in those areas at lower cost. And so I think there's an opportunity to deliver services much more efficiently when we learn from those places.
Okay, when it comes to taxation and people eventually getting fed up and deciding to leave the province, look, I we talked about this on the show this week, yesterday and today, and affordability. What is your opinion on people hitting a breaking point and just saying enough's enough? In particular, perhaps probably younger people with some mobility and the ability to move, in particular with jobs that allow them to go to different provinces. What are your thoughts on people hitting a threshold and just saying enough's enough, I'm out of here?
Well, I think that absolutely happens. The economic research is quite clear that taxation has an effect on location decisions. It's not the only thing that people consider, but at the margin, that affects whether people want to be here. It affects talent. It also affects capital. This is a province, where there's a lot of discussion about attracting healthcare workers as something that we very clearly need. Those people are mobile, and taxes will factor into their decision making. And so that's just another reason why I think we need serious tax reform.
Okay, so when it comes to serious tax reform, how deep does it need to go?
Well, I think it needs to go quite deep when you look at the magnitude of the uncompetitiveness in a province like Nova Scotia. Top earners are being taxed over 50%. And we have a tax problem across a number of different types of taxation. So just consider for a moment, Nova Scotians face the highest tax rates if they earn middle income, the second highest tax rate for top earners, the second highest tax rate on capital, the third highest tax rate on business. So really we have problems across the board. And it's not that we're mildly uncompetitive, it's that we're massively uncompetitive. And so if you look at nearby New England states or some of the more tax competitive provinces in Canada, the difference for even a modest earner is thousands of dollars a year.
Wow. Yeah, and with you compound that with the cost of living, with housing and fuel and food and on it goes. It's just it again hits a threshold where people will say, I can live in Alberta much cheaper. And look, I love the East Coast. I love the Maritimes. I perhaps have family here, but when all is said and done, people need to have opportunities. I've said this many, many times. And opportunities people will chase that dream, right? We've seen that play out many times.
That's exactly right. And look, Todd, this province has tons of advantages. I think it's a great place to live. We have all kinds to offer. But as long as we maintain a seriously uncompetitive tax regime, that's going to have an effect on people and on businesses locating here. And I think the province has a great opportunity to attract talent and to attract capital, but we need to get the tax system right.
Okay, and the report, of course, is available online. People can check it out at the Fraser Institute, correct?
Absolutely. FraserInstitute.org. You can find all of our research there.
Okay, Alex, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
All right, take care. Alex Whalen of the Fraser Institute. Halifax Jazz Fest is coming up. We'll talk to one of the performers when we come back. All right, Halifax Jazz Festival goes July 15th through the 17th, and among the performers is Christine Jensen, 3-time JUNO Award winner, Canadian saxophonist and composer. Christine, thanks for joining the show. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so how excited are you to be coming to Halifax?
Oh, you have no idea. It's always a dream of mine to just make it to the East Coast, but to play music there, it's been a long time. So I'm really looking forward to bringing my sounds to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let everybody know who might not know about you, about your pretty distinguished career, which goes quite a ways back now. Tell everybody about what you do.
Yeah, I'm old.
No, you're experienced.
You know what? I've been at this for 30 years with touring festivals and playing my music. I'm a composer and a player, but I write in a style that resonates with what jazz is. With instrumental music, I play the saxophone, and I have piano, bass, and drums with me, and we just go at it, and we love to reference music, our heroes from the past, as well as try to push the music forward. And a lot of that comes from way back to Duke Ellington, to Thelonious Monk, and then heading into Wayne Shorter, and now into, I guess I've been labeled to have sort of a personal stamp on this music with my compositions and my performance. So that's what has led me to, actually I was in Halifax for the JUNOs, now that I think about it. It was short and sweet. I did get to play there a few years ago in duo off the album that won the JUNO that we're touring called Day Moon.
Right.
And it's just exciting. Every night is totally different. We've been touring across Canada, and Halifax is our one hit on the East Coast, and then we go back into Ontario a little bit more to tour.
Okay, so jazz as a genre itself is known as, would you describe it as niche, or how would you describe jazz?
That's a really good question. Jazz has a very large wingspan across all genres of music. So where do we begin? I grew up listening to Oscar Peterson. He's being really celebrated. I'm playing a big show in Montreal tonight, celebrating his music. He is very, very popular for having done whatever. So I'm just turning off another thing.
Sure.
It popped on.
Yeah, no sweat.
Anyway, just I know it can be perplexing for an audience, just like art, just like, what am I doing going to this art show? But I think jazz is actually got a lot of popular music attachment. I mean, I play Paul Simon tunes. I play all sorts of things that I've really come to understand. Jazz grew out of popular music for me as a kid, and it's in my blood to just keep going with it. And there is a certain amount of sophistication to it from the amount of practice we have to do with the music in order to try to express ourselves at the highest level. Best way I can put it.
Yeah, and blues is kind of built into it as well. There's a blues connotation, right?
I always play a blues every night with my band. It's integral. I come from Nanaimo. I played in blues bars. The pianist I'm working with, he's also a great organ player, and he comes off of it as well. It's funny whenever I play the blues too. It's like I can tell the audience really connects, but I can also add this sophisticated language of jazz that stems a lot from Charlie Parker, especially over top of it that we put on it. So yeah, and it's Canadian. It's a Canadian version of what we're doing.
How much improvisation goes on in jazz? It's a key component to it as well.
Yeah, I mean we have a form that we'll all agree upon, and there's a lot of universal form like the blues or rhythm changes or old dance band standard songs that just became part of the canon of this music, much like Bach or Beethoven or Mozart. Like Ode to Joy is not far off from jazz. So we use these forms and we get to riff on them. It's kind of fun.
How much camaraderie is there in the jazz sphere?
Well, you got to have it or else it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I teach a lot too, and I'm like, you all sound like you're all playing really well, but you're playing by yourself with others. But to get to the really point of strong expression, I think that in the professional world, we tend to be able to play together and really connect. So finding a place of connection with this music really takes you to another place off in the sanctuary of the bandstand in the moment. So that's what we do.
All right, so you're playing the main stage on July 17th, correct?
I'm not sure it's the main stage. I thought we were playing at the Carlton.
Okay.
Is that the main stage?
Okay. No, my apologies. Playing at the Carlton, which is an amazing venue, which is really cool. Yeah. And
that's where we're going to go.
All right. So July 17th, you're playing at the Carlton. Again, my apologies. And if people want to know more about it, they can check it out online. Tickets are available. I'm looking at the Halifax Jazz Festival website right now, which is a great website. You can buy tickets, passes, and get all the details you need, including all the bios of the performers, including you, Christine. Listen, hopefully you enjoy, I'm sure you will, enjoy your stay out here and playing at the Carlton, and thanks for taking the time to do this today.
All right, thank you. Lovely chatting.
All right, take care. Christine Jensen, 3-time JUNO Award winner, Canadian saxophonist and composer. And again, check it all out online. Just Google the Halifax Jazz Festival, and you get all the details there. Another fantastic event in our city this summer. Lots and lots going on in the city, folks. Music Fest just held. Comedy Fest going on, of course. We get lots and lots. The tattoo, I could go on and on. I better stop before I forget some things. But anyway, get out and support it if at all possible. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to talk sports with Cecil. Of course, I'm sure he's going to give me the gears about the Yankees. I'm sure he will. No doubt. I'm ready for it. And Allister Aalders talking weekend weather and other things as well. We will be back. All right, you heard it. Allister Aalders, our weather specialist. Allister, no booze today.
Thank you. Thank you.
How about an applause, maybe?
Yeah,
even?
Vanessa, do you have that sound effect?
All right, not bad though, eh?
The weather's, it's been very muggy this week, but all in all, hasn't been too bad. And finally, a decent weekend shaping up. An isolated chance of a shower. We just have a weak trough with a cold front that's slowly moving through today, triggering a chance of showers and storms this afternoon. And because it's going to linger on Saturday, there is a chance we might see an isolated shower pop up. But otherwise, a fair amount of sunshine, temperatures, in the mid-20s, and the humidity it's coming down today, but we'll really notice that relief for tomorrow. So if you're not a fan of it, you're really going to like, I think, tomorrow's forecast, because the actual temperature, near 25 is not going to feel much warmer than that. So always nice to get a bit of a break, because I know a lot of people find it challenging this time of year just with how muggy it does get. And then it's very short-lived relief, because we do start to turn up the humidity again on Sunday, and the weather Sunday's fine and Monday's looking nice too, but by Monday we really do have higher humidity settling back in. So it's all in all, not a bad forecast finally for the weekend. A lot of people are traveling. I would say if you're traveling farther east in the province this weekend, that's where your chance of a shower will increase. So we're not completely free of rain chances this weekend. The north and eastern shores into Cape Breton will have a chance of showers, but a fair amount of sunshine too. And then, Sunday's looking nice across the entire province. So all in all, not too bad. And, like I said, the week, while it's been a bit muggy and for some of us hot, especially in the valley and inland from the Atlantic coast, it's been a hot, muggy week. Overall, it's not been too bad. Kind of feels like some typical July weather here in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, and look, if you want to escape the heat, just go to the coast because I've gone out a couple of times this week out to Crystal Crescent Beach, hoping to go for a swim and get out there, and it's like, yikes! It's cold. It is a lot cooler at the coast, and I mean, the only time you might not find relief at the Atlantic coast is if you have an offshore wind. One day last week. I think Wednesday it was like 32 degrees in the city and it was warm at the coast because the wind was blowing offshore. But yeah, the highs, while they've been, in the mid 20s and for some of us 30s at the Atlantic coast, it's been only in the high teens all week because, we have the ocean is much cooler. We have that onshore wind and there's been more cloud and fog at the coast. So yeah, it's been a lot cooler at the coast and that will be the case, at least for part of the weekend. A bit cooler at the coast tomorrow, but it's more of a westerly wind, so many of the coastlines will actually be a bit warmer than they have been all week tomorrow, near 20 or 21 degrees, which is not too bad. But yeah, usually you can find a bit of relief along the coast, and if it's not south-facing coastline, not too far to drive usually to maybe get to a north-facing coastline, depending on how much time you have in your day. All right, let's look at the month that was June and rainfall and temperatures and just kind of let's have a postmortem on June. Yeah, so I mean, June got off to a pretty wet start here in Nova Scotia. We had quite a bit of rain, but throughout the month, what dominated the precipitation outlook was more so showery weather and at times some thunderstorms. So precipitation was below average across the province, which is, something we don't really want to hear. We did have a couple good months because obviously we've talked about for the last little while the drought conditions we've been under, and we had that rain through April and May that really did help, but it was a drier month, it's been good in some cases. I'm hearing, that some of the early crops coming in like strawberries, that they're doing really well this year so far. So that, it's good in that sense, but obviously, we do have to watch the drought situation because we did eliminate pretty much that drought and we don't want to revert back into it, especially if it's going to remain dry for the rest of the summer. But at Halifax Stanfield, it was the 9th driest June on record. So just gives you a bit of a picture of how dry it was. Temperatures were very, they fluctuated throughout the month. We obviously had that 2-day period of hot, humid weather near the end of June that brought record-breaking temperatures to parts of the province. But overall, temperatures were near or just a degree and a half above average. So nothing too considerable. No real temperature records that were broken in Nova Scotia. So it was a more average month for temperatures because we had that fluctuation. But obviously the big story for June was the drier conditions that we had settling in. And unfortunately, I mean, I find June can go either way. It can be a really nice month or it can be a really wet and rainy month. But obviously this time of year is when we start seeing less of those more defined areas of widespread rain moving in. It's more showery and thunderstorms. So the rainfall often becomes quite variable around this time of year just because of the nature of showers. They bubble up in the afternoon and might only affect a few communities before they taper off. So we're in that time of year where we do need a bit of rain to help out with our farmers and our wells and our lake water levels too, because obviously that was a big concern last summer into the fall was the low well levels, and that's always a concern at this time of year. So hopefully we can get a bit of a balance, put it on. I mean, I guess there's no ideal time in the summer for when it rains because a lot of us take time off during the week rather than, just having the weekend off. But yeah, so we do have a bit of a precipitation deficit that we need to make up. But overall temperatures were a bit near average or just a bit above when you consider all the factors through the month. Yeah, and when you look at it in its totality, we've got a pretty amazing climate here in the Maritimes. I mean, it's quite ideal. I really think it is. I mean,
the winter, it can, we do get cold, but the ocean does a great job moderating our temperature so that it doesn't get too cold. Our springs can be a little dull at times, but we also get some really nice weather. And then, our summers are generally really nice. And I mean, despite it, being much cooler often at the coast, you don't have to go far inland, and it's, you get into a lot of sunshine, and it gets pretty hot in the summer. And then our falls are really beautiful, especially, it's we get that warm weather more often now, lingering through September and sometimes into October. So, some people I'm sure might not agree with us, but I do think we do have a pretty good seasonal climate.
Pretty good balance.
Pretty good balance,
nice
for
balance.
sure.
Like people say that they'd like to live in Florida, but not this time of year.
No, in Florida, it's basically hot, humid every day, and thunderstorms bubble up in the afternoon. It's kind of a rinse and repeat there. It's very much kind of almost like what we're dealing with today with the clouds and the fog, but some sunshine and thunderstorms. And it's very much a rinse and repeat. There's no variability in the pattern in Florida at this time of year and for much of the year. So it is nice that we get a bit of variability, because if you're not obviously if you live in Florida, you grew up in Florida, you're probably used to the tropical humidity. But around here, where we do see more fluctuations between comfortable and more oppressive humidity. Not everyone is a fan of it or can tolerate it as well. So I think we have some of the best weather here. And as a weather forecaster, you get to forecast pretty much everything here too.
That's right. The National Hurricane Center monitoring possible disturbance. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so there's a very small area that they're monitoring off the Carolina and Georgia coasts. 60% chance that it develops into a tropical disturbance or a weak tropical storm. And regardless of if that does develop or not, it looks like it's going to continue to bring some rainy weather, some tropical downpours and thunderstorms to Florida and along the coast there, through the Carolinas and in the Georgia coast, with some moderate winds and as well some rip currents, just because the system will be stalling there. But when I spoke to Dan earlier in the week, I said that I didn't really think it was a concern for us, and I would still say that now. It looks like if it does develop into anything, it's going to weaken and just become a remnant area of disorganized showers that might feed into a cold front later in the week, but overall it doesn't look to have a major influence on our weather. So that's good at this time of year, because I know hurricane season always captures our interest, but when those storms start to form along the eastern seaboard of the US, people do get a little cautious, because it's relatively close in a sense where obviously these systems often travel, say, up the eastern seaboard and in our direction. But like I said, if it develops into anything, it's going to be fairly weak. It's more so a thunderstorm showery system for those states, and it should weaken and not really influence our weather at all, maybe contributing some moisture into our region later next week. But overall, it's not looking like it will be too impactful, but obviously I'll keep a very close eye on it if anything changes.
What's the peak part of the hurricane season?
Yeah, so the peak of the hurricane season is around, I believe it's September 10th. So it's that late summer, early fall period where that's when we see the greatest number of storms and hurricanes that do develop, because obviously the oceans have had a great chance of heating up, not just in that main development region, but as well off the east coast of the U.S. and up into our region. So that's traditionally when the season peaks, is early, mid-September, when we have our greatest number of storms. Obviously, where it peaks in the basin can vary, but for us here in Atlantic Canada, we have to keep an eye on it all through the season. But traditionally we monitor September and October here in Nova Scotia for the better opportunities that we could see a storm or a remnant storm move in. So far the Saharan dust that's been moving off of Africa has been limiting the development of storms, which has been good so far. That will not continue forever, so we will have to keep an eye on that later in the season. But overall, it's fairly quiet out there right now, so that's great to see.
Okay, we talk a lot about muggy weather. We talked about it already in this chat and a few times. What's the term? Where are the origins of that term muggy?
Yeah, it's very interesting. So it's defined as of the weather being oppressively humid, damp, and feeling very close or very foggy. So according to Oxford, the word originates from the 17th and 18th centuries, likely linked to Scandinavian language Old Norse. So the word muggy is a translation of the word mugga and also potentially mug or muggin. And that roughly translates to drizzle or mist. So it comes from origins of, kind of drizzle and fog. So it looks like we took that translation and it evolved over towards, muggy. And it's a fitting definition because obviously here in Atlantic Canada, the amount of fog and drizzle we experience comes with increased humidity at this time of year, especially during the summertime. So it's originated in Scandinavian Old Norse, the terms mugga, mug, or muggin evolved to muggy, and basically just means, drizzle, mist, fog, and now we associate it with drizzle, mist, and fog, but also these hot summer days where it's, it might be 28 degrees, but it's feeling more like 38, and we've had a few of those days this week for sure.
Indeed. Okay, so just a quick recap again for the weekend weather.
Weekend weather looking pretty good. Chance of an isolated shower tomorrow, but otherwise a fair amount of sunshine. Temperatures in the high 20s with low humidity, and then sun and clouds Sunday, and temperatures are looking to be in the low to mid 20s, humidity up a bit. And nice Sunday, warmer, humid, and then some showers and cloud cover for Tuesday.
Okay, Alistair, great stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's our weather specialist, Allister Aalders. Schwartz and Cecil when we come back. All right, time to talk sports with our sports guru, Cecil Wright. Cecil, let's get it over with, okay? Let's just get it over with right now.
What? Mitch Marner?
No, well, that, but the Yankees getting swept, yep.
So the Red Sox have swept them this year. The Blue Jays have swept them. I'm pretty sure Tampa's gonna sweep them.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers swept them as well, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe not. But my gosh, what is going on here?
Stanton's back.
Yeah. Yeah, Stanton.
That's the guy. I mean, I tease my other Yankee friend Tom Hartnett. I tease him all the time about Stanton. Stanton's back, so the team's going down. He'll probably hit a couple home runs before he breaks a toe, fouls a ball off his foot or something like that.
Yeah.
That guy's got the greatest contract in history. He hardly ever plays and is making millions.
That's true. So what are the Blue Jays doing right besides hitting the cover off the ball?
That's what they're doing, man. They're hitting the ball like crazy, and that's with Bichette being out of the lineup, for the past few games. And he came back last night, but if they get him going with the rest of those guys, I mean, Vladdy's hitting the ball, and really, it only takes two guys to carry a team. The Yankees have shown you that with Aaron Judge and the other guy, like in their lineup, though, is the Chisholm guy.
He's playing well. Yeah.
But I give the Blue Jays a lot of credit. They're hanging in there. They got off to the horrible start, but they put things together. If their pitching holds up, they're going to be a challenge.
George Springer, my gosh, this guy's playing unbelievable baseball right now, and not a young guy either.
No, didn't he have another grand slam? No, it wasn't a grand slam last night. It was
a couple home runs.
Shot.
Yeah, that's right.
Guy's incredible, and it just proves that if you work hard, you keep yourself in good shape, you can play this game well into your 30s, and some of these guys even into their early 40s.
Yeah, I think I heard a statistic, though. The number of active players over 35 is not that many, though, compared to in the steroid era.
Yeah, well, you've landed on the reason why, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's right.
That the whole Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, era, and I'll throw Manny Ramirez in there. Just to make you feel good. See, I'm not a homer.
How about David Ortiz? How did he do it?
Just good hand-eye coordination.
Yeah, right. There you go. How about those Rays, though? They're only one game back as well. They're in it.
Yeah, every year they come up with pitchers I've never heard of who throw the ball 95, 96 miles an hour or better, and just seem to, make a move at some point in the season. They're going to win, 12 out of 14 games and just throw the whole AL East for a loop. I appreciate those guys, and I think Kevin Cash should be manager of the year.
Yeah, and the Red Sox, at 2 games under 500, are only 6.5 games out of first place. That's not out of it at all.
No, and that's why the big question is what are they going to do at the trade deadline? Are they going to be buyers or sellers? I'm hoping they'll be buyers, but, the Red Sox front office is notoriously cheap, as we have seen.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if they sold off a couple guys, and everybody's going to want to roll this Chapman. The guy has been lights out all year, and, getting a closer like that isn't something that happens every day.
No, that's right. So it's really anybody's win now for the division. I mean, the Blue Jays, Yankees, the Red Sox probably not going to be in the mix, but it's the AL East ain't what it used to be, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, the thing about the Red Sox is they're still in the wild card contention, and all that really matters is making the playoffs gives you a chance. You gotta get there first. So I'm pretty sure that's what they're playing for, unless they're able to rip off a nice little 5-10 game win streak. And if they win the series they're starting today with Washington, and the Yankees lose some more, the Blue Jays aren't going to win every game. Like you said, the AL East is no longer the power division in baseball.
Well, that's right. All right, let's talk about Mitch Marner and gone to Las Vegas. I suppose that for the Leafs, this is the best case scenario because he's as far away from Toronto as he can get. They're probably not going to face Vegas in the Stanley Cup playoffs unless the Leafs ever make it to the Stanley Cup final, which probably is going to happen. So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Well, my thing is, isn't that really going to have an adverse effect on Matthews? Marner's the guy who set him up quite a bit. Now, you've lost your setup man. Who's going to replace him? Whoever it is you bring in or whoever it is you elevate to that first line is not going to be able to give you the same production as Marner, at least not initially. It's going to take some time for the chemistry to set in. I think it's a good move, but I was more surprised that they, quite honestly, didn't trade Matthews because they'd have got the sun, the moon, the stars for him.
Yeah, but Matthews, the captain, they just signed him to a huge deal. That would be a tough sell, would it not?
So what? The Bruins just traded their captain, and what he do? Ends up helping the team win the Stanley Cup again.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then re-signed with Florida. I was kind of hoping he'd come back for a swan song in Boston. And he said, forget that. I'm going for the money. I don't blame him.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you surprised that he signed a 6-year deal in Florida?
I'm surprised that Florida gave him a 6-year deal. There's no way he's going to be playing for 6 more years, and I think both sides know that. But, he'll get some good money up front, and, he'll be set for life. I think Brad Marchand, you're going to laugh at this. I think Brad Marchand's going to make a hell of a color commentator when he decides to get into TV. The guy, he'd be fantastic in every facet of the game. And I'm sure he's got all kinds of interesting stories to tell, too.
Oh, but he does. So on the Marner deal, I suppose good for him, right? Obviously going out to Vegas. I think it's a good fit for him.
Well, I think so. Vegas is a good team. They're a challenger out there for the Cup. I think it's going to be very interesting to see the reaction he gets when he comes back to Toronto. I'm not sure all the fans are going to appreciate what he's done.
No.
But we'll see. We'll see. I think it's a good move for him individually.
Okay. Before I let you go, what you got going on locally that you'd like to promote?
Oh, baby, baseball tonight, Mainland Common, the Halifax Senior Mets versus the Metro Brewers. I told you before, these two teams do not get along, and every time they play, it's a close one and hotly contested. 7:30 first pitch.
Okay, pal. Appreciate it. We'll talk next week.
Have a great weekend.
Okay, you got it. Cecil Wright, sports guru. Speaking of the weekend, enjoy your weekend, everybody. And thanks so much for tuning in and listening. We very much appreciate it. I'd like to thank Vanessa Van Den Ness on the other side of the glass. at the control board, doing a fine job as always. We're back on Monday, 10 o'clock. See you then.